to begin with a few names so that you can connect with the topic. When we talk about the Western Romantic poets, we talk about William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, John Keats, P.B. Shelley, and we talk about early Indo-Anglian Poetics, the first generation of poets in India who wrote in English. We have Henry Louis Vivian de Rosio, Taru Dutt, Sarojini Naidu, Sri Aurobindo, Michael Madhusudhan Dutt, and we are going to study the difference and the similarities on these parameters. So first, I identify the problem statement, the mimicry critique. Historically, early Indo-Anglian poetry has been dismissed as merely derivative mimicry of Western Romanticism. Lack of authenticity, critics like Theodore Dam argued these poets fail to capture anything essentially Eastern in conception, Anglicization of bias, evaluations often faulted writers for an anxiousness to anglize their vocabulary and atmospheric description. Aesthetic judgment, traditional appreciation has relied on narrow aesthetic lines, denying the work its historical and social context. Active grappling, reductive views ignored the active grappling, engaging deeply with English to make it express their own identity, occurring as the colonized sees the English language. Meeting ground, the word served as strategic meeting ground of engagement between the colonized and the colonizer. Trauma to strangeness, the dismissal of this era fails to recognize the shift from a trauma of estrangement, feeling disconnected, to a poetics of strangeness, turning that feeling into creativity. Silent presence. Without revaluation, the colonized subject remains a silent present or unnoticed rather than an active, transformative force. The research objectives: first, delineate narrative shifts to analyze structural and thematic shifts in nature's function between Western and early Indian poetry. Subjective engagement to move nature beyond a detached background to a subjective site of engagement, no longer a decorative background, but with emotional and personal connection. Third, Orientalist influence to investigate how Orientalist scholarship provided the legendary rose, that is, the stories, myths, and vocabulary for Indian antiquity. Textual world to establish that this poetry was an engagement with a recovered textual world, history, myths, and cultural knowledge rather than a mere imitation of landscape. Continuing, analyze prosodic innovations to explore how submersive rhythms disrupted the traditional august English institution of iambic pentameter, a common rhythm in English poetry. Language reposition to determine how Indian life rhythms were used to dispose and then repose the colonial language. That is, our poets used English in their own way. Strategic empathy to explore how nature imagery served as a medium for ambassadorial strategic empathy for global audience. That is, they used nature to express their own emotions and connect globally with readers. Cultural ambassadorship to analyze the use of sensory imagery like neem, champak, lotus to reveal the heart of India. Research methodology. First, comparative textual analysis. A systematic study was done comparing 19th century Indian English words with British Romantic precursors. Second, historical poetics, utilizing insights from historical poetics to assess how authors perceived the institutional context of their writing. Archival research, drawing upon Orientalist research and early Anglo-Indian newspapers archives to identify subject matter origins. Linguistic stylistics, applying models of transitivity and prosody to identify Indian life rhythms within English metrical forms. Research findings: nature's evolution. Nature transitioned from a detached background to a subjective site of historical and national engagement. Active grappling. Early Indo-Anglian words functioned as active grappling with British culture rather than derivative mimicry, reshaping English to express own identity. Identity tools. Indian poet transformed passive aesthetic models into active narrative tools for expressing nationalism. Narrative bridge, indigenous flora, served as a bridge linking personal childhood memory with collective national heritage. Next, rhythmic disruption. Poets utilize the free decisible to disrupt the traditional August English institution of iambic pentameter. Now, a 10-syllable line, but no strict rhythm rules, a free expression. Language reposition, writers injected Indian life rhythms into the colonial tongue to dispose and then repose the language. Demystifying hegemony. Metrical subversion demystified British linguistic hegemony by challenging the naturalness of scansional meter. English poetic rules were not natural, but just one way of writing. Post-colonial transformation, innovations in syllabic meter achieved post-colonial transformation of English poetic rhythm. Botanical deixis, the specific names of flora establish a poetics of strangeness, something new that restored reality to the colonized subject, using names like lotus, neem, bangles, rather than tree, flower, or materials. Strategic empathy, sensory nature imagery functioned as ambassadorial strategic empathy to reveal the heart of India to global audiences. Foreign readers could relate to and appreciate Indian culture. Recovered antiquity, Oriental scholarship provided the legendary lore and vocabulary necessary to articulate Indian antiquity, revival of ancient Indian history and culture in poetry. Acoustic critic, the transition from the tonal lark to material drum, served as a narrative critique of imperial expansion. Changes in sound reflected change from peace to conflict, expressing every change and expressing every emotion. And I also have recommendations for future research on this. The eco-critical re-evaluation, analyze Mother India trope as a narrative technique of eco-critical subversion, challenging colonial views. Botanical deixis framework, implement botanical deixis to study how naming flora, lotus neem creates intersubjective spaces. Acoustic transitions, investigate the shift from romantic spontaneous harmony to the discontented drum of colonial militarism. Post-colonial interlanguage, explore how mapping indigenous flora onto English creates a language that accommodates specific colonized experiences. And these are the references which I've used for my study. Ekta Goswami, DeRosio Henry Louis Vivian, Kamla Das, Viren Dharwekar, Rajiv S. Patke, Peter Groves. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my research paper.